Well, welcome to your journey towards wholeness with botanical medicine. This is the first lesson in the botanical medicine study course with me, Stephanie Georgia. Now, the title of this lesson is called The Dynamism of Botanical Medicine. Now, that's a really interesting term, and we're going to get into that and why this needs to be the first lesson of the botanical medicine study course. Now, the purpose of this lesson is to enter into a living, cognitive, and soulful relationship with the world of plants to foster healing for the human being. Now, according, according to Rudolf Steiner, and this basically comes from his books on the fundamentals of therapy and pastoral medicine. There are certain behaviors that are needed to foster the skills of a healer. And what are these behaviors? He says to have the consciousness of a physician, the doctor must be in nature and must have adequate sleep. Now, any casual observation of modern physicians, medical students, and nurses shows that these two behaviors are completely absent. Now, why did Steiner say such things? Because he wanted to not only foster ancient knowledge when it came to healing, but also a new approach to medicine where one is fully conscious, independent in thinking, but also collaborating with nature. Our modern approach to medicine and healing is very sterile and devoid of nature. Sometimes this is necessary, but when it comes to prevention and healing, long-term healing, especially from chronic disease, one must sleep because that's where we commune with our spirit as well as our unconscious, and we must learn to observe nature in order to create living partnerships. So, what is dynamism? What does the word dynamism mean when it comes to a medical paradigm? Dynamism, in this case, means something that is living, changing, and transformational in nature. Dynamic forms of healing practices are living, transformational, and relational. Relational is the very important term and is the most significant in this definition. And it's also the most different between dynamic forms of medicine and orthodox allopathic materialistic forms of medicine. Now, in the introduction to this course, I mentioned The Spell of the Sensuous by David Abrams. Now, he is a very interesting person, and he is basically a philosopher specializing in eco-psychology, which is the psychology of human-earth relationships. In The Spell of the Sensuous, Abrams wrote about his experiences traveling the world and living in indigenous communities. One of the main tenets of the books is that in these cultures, the healers are the community members which facilitate communication between the physical and non-physical worlds. One could consider this communication that these healers have in these traditional indigenous cultures as between the physical and spiritual worlds, specifically the spirit of nature. Healers who practice this form of medicine are looking at relationships between the environment, the non-physical world, and the human body. The key to a dynamic healing approach to botanical medicine is to observe nature. Obviously, this is not a shoot from the hip type of cookbook medicine. This is a much slower but more complete approach to applying plants as medicine. When you've learned to observe It will develop your intuition so that you have a more comprehensive knowledge base informed by your soul as well as your brain when it comes to choosing remedies. The observation of nature is part of learning about plants. So, how do we understand plants? The best way to understand the healing gesture of plants is through plant families. What is a plant gesture, you ask? The gesture of a plant is how they interact with the environment, specifically the sun. Many of us who have had any basic ecology class or botany or biology class know that you look at things like meadows and forests, and you notice how the plants interact with the sun in these different environments. And in the meadow, there's more access to sun. But in a forest, particularly, let's say a rainforest, the sun is really quite available at the top, but at the bottom, it's not so available. And what we find is in these bottom plants, particularly in the rainforest, is the leaves are really big because they're kind of almost like trying to capture the sun and extend their surface area in order to do that. So this is what we do. And it's not like you have to go out and stare at plants before you figure out what to give somebody. But when you learn your plants and you learn your remedies by observing them very specifically, this is what informs you, and then it helps your intuition when you need to apply it when you're formulating a remedy. Now, the plant families is basically the foundation for the botanical medicine study course. And we will go into this in quite a detail, but it's uh, the Asteraceae, which also used to be called the sunflower or daisy family, and it's the characteristic of these plants. And what you need to understand when you start observing these plants is things like what are their flowers like? And the fancy term for that is the inflorescence, and it means a cluster of flowers arranged on a stem that is composed of a main branch or an arrangement of branches. And in this family, the telltale quality is what we think of as a flower is actually a group of flowers. So the pretty little yellow or white center of these flowers, the petals on the outside are basically almost leaves. It's the center of the flower that's a group of flowers. And their roots are tap roots, which go deep down into the ground. And the leaves often contain latex or resin. And the qualities of the Asteraceae family to keep in mind is that they grow everywhere. The fancy botanical term is cosmopolitan. And the focus of this plant is on the flowering nature. So the plant just puts all its effort into creating the flower, and then it fades away. The family thrives in summer, which is the season of the sun, and the gesture of the plant's focus is towards the heaven or towards the sun. It is this gesture of this family, the focus on the sun, that not only we can incorporate into our healing remedies, but this plant also heals the earth. Now, one of the most common members of this family is something that I feel needs a lot more respect, and it's the dandelion. And in this picture, you notice all the different phases of the dandelion, the one where the beautiful composite flower is, up in this up to the sun, and then all of those flowers, every single one of them produces one seed, and that makes this beautiful puffball that people like to blow, and it floats through the air, and then plants new dandelions. Now, if you go into a meadow and you look at where the dandelions are collecting, or what I find most informative is in urban areas, look at where the dandelions come. And these are super inspiring plants. They grow in the middle of freeways and in cracks and crevices of sidewalks and roads. Um, that's where they grow. And they also have these deep, deep tap roots, which, if you want to get rid of dandelions, spraying them with pesticides that cause cancer isn't the best idea. You really do need to pull up the entire plant in this deep tap root. But it's interesting that these plants, especially one in urban area, is very healing to the liver. And the liver tends to be quite stressed in urban areas. So it's just different ways that you can look at this incredible plant in terms of its gesture. And it comes into meadows and into your garden literally to heal your garden, to bring the sunlight deep down into the soil. And that's where all the transformation of all the plants happens, is in the soil. Now, understanding gestures of plants is really how traditional healers practiced their trade. Now, many of us are familiar with the Bach flower remedies, Dr. Edward Bach. He was a physician, and he basically noticed that sometimes he had patients with similar diseases, and one got better and the other one didn't. And he basically was trying to figure out why, and he realized that the attitude and emotional and spiritual state of the client determined whether or not they got better. So, what he did, which sounds very woo-woo, but he did it, and this was in the 1930s, he went out into the garden and he started observing plants, trees, flowers, all sorts of different things. And he basically intuited how these plants would assist people in their challenges of their emotions as well as their spiritual challenges. And that was how he came up with the original Bach flower remedies. And after he did that, there are numerous flower essence companies. There's one up in Northern California called the Flower Essence Society. And they used this process of observing nature, observing gestures, to create a whole different set of remedies based on native California plants and others. So, this is quite an effective way to facilitate healing. Uh, we also know, in terms of rainforest herbalism, that the medicine men, the shamans, have living relationships with these plants. And they actually have a song that is appropriate for each plant that they and the sick person sing while they take specific plants to heal themselves. This intuitive interaction and observation of nature is very inherent in traditional Chinese medicine. And we also know that midwives of ages gone by also had special relationships with nature and utilized this in order to facilitate healing. Now, there are other ways that we can look at this dynamic relationship between humans and nature. And this comes from anthroposophical medicine. And it's the fourfold being, which is divided up into mineral, um, plant, animal, and humans. And we humans have four folds. Now, the four bodies are the physical, and this is the material aspect of being. And this is made up of molecules and elements. And these things are things like gemstones and semi-precious stones and different types of soil. These are all minerals. And there's what's called the etheric body, and this is the life body which animates the physical. So the difference between a quartz and a plant is a plant lives and it has an etheric body. Now, an astral body, this is present in animals. And this is a sensorial aspect of being where emotional feelings and sense impressions are encountered. And if you have any animals in your life, you know that they have feelings. They understand certain things. And there is an interaction between the physical and the etheric bodies within an individual, which can be affected by the astral. And finally, the ego, and that's present in the human being. This is the individual consciousness part of our being, where we have a sense of self independent from others. And this is where we know that we are individuals. We know this. And we think in our ego. This is where our consciousness and our thinking. Now, our consciousness, our ego, and our thinking is informed by all of these other bodies. But this is what sets us apart from all of the other kingdoms in nature, the plant and the animal, obviously the mineral. So, as I said before, minerals have a physical body, plants have a physical and etheric body, animals have a physical, etheric, and astral body, and the human has all of those plus an ego. And health, from this perspective, is when all of these bodies interact and function at their optimal level. Illness results when there is an imbalance between these bodies, which causes the etheric or life body to weaken. When humans contemplate the nature and gesture of plants, specifically living plants, it's all fine and wonderful to look at pictures of plants, but really to encounter the herbs, the plants in their living form. Um, this is where humans uh, can collaborate with plants in order to foster healing because we share an etheric body with the plants. Botanical medicine is a healing paradigm. And it's unique in that plants can stimulate all aspects of the human. Obviously, there's a physical aspect of the plants. There's active constituents that can stimulate certain functions in the human body, activate receptors, do all sorts of things. But there are other characteristics in the plants that can affect the entire person, which cannot be replicated by synthesizing similar chemical compounds in a laboratory. Plants have unique qualities. Their etheric body, which interacts with the environments and can be applied in phytotherapy. Humanity uh, can also relate to the plant world. And this comes from Dr. Hauschka, which is a wonderful producer of beautiful skincare and skin beautifying products such as makeups, etc. And this shows the relationship between plants and humans. And humanity is considered to be a microcosm of this relationship where the roots of the plant have a relationship with the nerve sense pole or the head or the thinking part, of the human body. And the middle realm, where our rhythm comes from in terms of respiration and our cardiovascular system, these are affected by the rhythm system of the plant, the middle system of the plant. And the leaves are where this wonderful interchange between the sun and the plant happens. And so we can see this correlation between the heart and the lungs and the leaves. And then the flowers have a correlation with the metabolism. So this is another way we can look at the dynamics of botanical medicines. Now, humanity, as I said, is also considered to be a microcosm of the cosmos, where organs and tissues, parts of the body are all related to various planetary systems. And this paradigm was very widely used all over the world, I would say, until probably maybe 100 years ago. And it relates to how the human being incarnates and how this context is that the human being, as it's coming to Earth, goes through all the different planetary spheres. And different planetary spheres affect different organs, different bodily tissues, different uh, limbs, uh, all sorts of things in the body, but also influences different plants. And if you look at older herbals, say culpepers or Gerard, and these were, 15th and 16th and 17th century herbals, they will say this plant is dominated by, let's say, Jupiter. And this is where that comes from. So if you understand the organs in terms of their cosmic influences and the plants in terms of their cosmic influences, things can be applied in order to bring about wholeness and healing. Now, we are quite separated from nature. And our technological modern culture, many unpleasant and ultimately lethal outcomes have resulted from this division. Pollution has taken quite a toll on the entire planet and most life forms. A significant outcome has been the accumulation of greenhouse gases, damaging the atmosphere and protective structures surrounding the earth. While politicians and corporations try to confuse and ignore such outcomes of pollution, the reality is that our climate is on a dangerous and destructive path. One way to heal this division is by partnering consciously with the natural world. Thomas Berry, through his landmark book, The Universe Story, says that humanity is on the verge of a new cycle of evolution. He calls this new cycle the ecozoic period. This cycle is dependent on humans collaborating with nature in order to evolve into a healthy coexistence. The journey you are about to begin on will enable you to not only learn all aspects of botanical medicine, but also contribute your soul and spirit to healing the division and creating a healthy ecozoic phase of evolution. Welcome to the first healthy step in creating a sound future for yourself, your loved ones, and the broader community of life. So look at your chapter that has been included with this lesson. And there is also an exercise page where you are going to get your first steps in learning how to observe nature and reflect upon what it is you're learning. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to our next lesson.